In this tutorial, we will be looking at creating a new project with a form template. We have on our screen the eFORMz composer, and it is blank. We've got nothing going on. The composer is the design tool of eFORMz. It's where you can format and manage your data and the overall design of any form, label, or report you intend to generate with eFORMz. eFORMz, of course, uses projects, and that has a .efz extension. And to create a new project, you'll need to get into the composer and build the project. So we have the composer open. How do we create this new project? There are three methods to create a new project. The first is by navigating to the main menu and selecting File and New Project. Another method is the toolbar beneath the main menu has a Create New Project icon. You can click that. Or you can right-click in the project window, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on, and select New Project. And we'll go ahead and do that. And we have a project started. And in this project window, this is where you'll see the project tree, kind of your overall outline of what's going on with the project. And if we right-click the project, we can add a page to it. Typically, you'll only need one page per project. In fact, almost all the time, you'll only need one page per project. You'll be doing most of the editing with the form. The page itself, not a lot happens to it. You can adjust the lines per page, but for now, we're just going to accept the defaults since that's typically what you'll do by clicking OK. So we have a project, we have a page added to a project. We need to add the form. This is where most of the work is going to happen. And to do that, we can right-click the page and select Add Form. The Select dialog box will display, and we can have two sources for our form. We can choose one from a file, and that's what we're going to be doing in this particular tutorial. Or you can choose a blank form. In another video, we'll take a look at that. When you select the blank form option, it means that you'll be bringing your form either from another eFORMz project, which is for more advanced users, or more often you'll be building your form with the document template, which is the proprietary design tool of the eFORMz composer. And again, you're not required to use the document template at all. You can use a form template from File, which is what we're going to do here. Both uses are fairly common. It really depends on what you're looking for. The document template has advantages in terms of pagination and repeatability of data, but the form template obviously has ease of use and no need to use a design tool. So there are benefits and drawbacks to each method. Each method has its own advantages. It's really up to you to determine which one you intend on using. But for this video, we'll take a look at From File, and if we select OK, we're going to look for the source of our form. And under Minisoft eFORMz projects, I created another folder called Video Sample. How fitting. And I have a form here that's a PRM, which is a print file. But if I navigate up to the All Files section in the Files of Type drop-down menu, you'll note that I have a couple. In fact, I actually have three different file types I could use. I have that PRN file, which is just a print file, so File to Print. I also have a PDF file, which eFORMz can use, although there are some drawbacks to using a PDF. The one advantage is it's very easy. If you have one, you can plug it in and it's all ready to go. The downside is that sometimes it doesn't render all that well to printers because we read it in as an image. Also, it may be tricky sometimes getting the resolution correct with outputting it again to a file or to a printer. So there are some resolution concerns. There's also a lack of flexibility in that you can't really edit a PDF file. Of course, you cannot really edit a PRN file, a print file, but there's some advantage to that in that the printer really reads these very well. Obviously, if you use grayscale, images and everything, it'll look really, really good, really, really smooth. But the overall best format is RTF, Revisable Text Format. It gives you the most flexibility, and you can always take an RTF and create a PDF or a PRN file from that. These are not the only three file choices you could use, but these are the three most common. So we're going to use an RTF because eFORMz really integrates well with this, and it's also the most flexible. It gives us the most options. So just we can open that, and it's going to give us the Form Properties dialog box. And there's a lot going on here. We can adjust the page size. There are a variety of options: letter, legal, ledger, and whatnot. Orientation, portrait or landscape, or reverse portrait, reverse landscape. We can adjust the offsets. We'll take a look at that later. Lines per inch as well. But most of this stuff you'll probably not need to adjust until you get to the point where you're printing. So we're just going to go ahead and accept the defaults for now by clicking OK, and we have our form. But we still don't see anything going on in our viewer or in our variables window in the bottom left here, or really we just don't see anything. I mean, what do we edit, right? Well, this is where we right-click our form and select Display Form and Data. And when we click OK, the Select dialog will display again, but this time it's going to be asking us for the source of data. Where are we going to be getting our data file from? eFORMz can take a lot of output from any application software that you are using, and we can take that output and bring it into the composer as input, and we take a variety of output styles, output files, if you will: ZPL, XML, text, data file, which is just a DAT extension. A variety of formats can be used as input. And if we select From File, we can bring those files in. Test data is very rarely used. It's used if you really just want to see the form, and then you can create your own kind of test data file in the composer just to see where everything would line up. It's not commonly used, but you may have a use for it down the road. But for this example, we're going to be doing what most eFORMz users are doing, and that is taking it in from File. If we select OK, we can navigate to our video sample folder here, and as you see, files of type is data files. I don't actually have any .dat files in this directory, or in this folder rather. So if I go to the All Files, Files of Type, we'll see I have two. I have a text file and an XML file. Things are going to be a little bit different depending on which one you choose. Most of the time with XML, it's a little bit different from the rest of the data types in eFORMz because XML has the node tree, and so eFORMz reads that in really well, and it integrates really well with extensible markup language and uses the whole node format. With other formats, it'll be just a typical look. It'll have the data render as almost looking like text, or PCL, and we can take that and right-click and drag and bring strings of characters onto our form, or simply leave it as is. And we're going to be looking at that shortly. So let's go ahead and open this text file up here. And oh, there we go. Everything is displaying. So we have our data in the top and our form with the data at the bottom. So before we take a look at the form, because we obviously would like to know what's going on with our form template here, let's go ahead and do just a brief tour of what's going on with all of these window panes, because it can be a little intimidating at first. So to the far left here, we have our project window, and obviously we've talked about this a little bit, but the project window is what controls the outline of the project. It's kind of the project tree is what we like to call it. And so it's going to show us really everything that's going on in the project, the forms, variables, rules, any other customized changes being implemented to your project. They're going to show up here. To the right, we have the viewer, which is the biggest of the windows, and the viewer has two panes. The top pane is where your data is coming in, and if we look, we scroll down here, we can see all of our data in the top pane of the viewer. And in the bottom pane of the viewer is where you'll see the form merged with the data. And so we see the form and we see the data like so. So we have all that. In the bottom left hand corner here we have our variables window. When you add a variable, you will see the string of characters that the variable is picking up, the data that a variable contains, and that will display here. in the variables window. This can be very helpful if you have a lot of variables and you want to know what you're picking up. So that's a very helpful window in the bottom left there. So we have our form and data displaying. Obviously, we want to take a look at our form template because that's going to change depending on user. And so how is it that we got this form template ready and uploaded into eFORMz? We'll also note that the data is not exactly matching up where we want it. We'll see that we have the data kind of all over the place here. How do we get the data to line up with our form? Do we create variables and place them manually? We can certainly do that. Or is there a method where we can simply, in a publishing tool of some kind like Microsoft Word or WordPerfect, line up the data with the form? Alright, so we have our form template, our sample invoice revisable text format, or RTF form template. Up here I have it in Microsoft Word, but you can edit this or create any form template you would like in any publishing tool that you prefer. And we'll see that it's just a pretty typical form, just boxes, some text elements, some line elements, all the way down the line. And really you can move things around, you can bold things, change fonts, text, what have you. The cool thing about RTF is that eFORMz has a great integration with it, where if you use an RTF, the minute you make a change and save it in your publishing tool, you can reload it using the reload icon or the reload button on the toolbar beneath the main menu in the composer. And I will take a look at that here shortly. But let's go ahead and make a change so that we can notice that. Let's change make an easy one. We'll just change the color of invoice, and we can change it to red, why not? And that pops a little bit, so we'll be able to notice it. And once we've changed that, we can select save, and so we've saved a change. And if we go back into the composer and select this reload icon, it will reload this change automatically. That's part of the flexibility and one of the main advantages of an RTF form. Obviously there are advantages to using PDF or PRN. PRN works really well with printers. It's particularly good if you're printing in black and white and you want to grayscale things, particularly with grayscale logos. PRN works really well. You can also use a PDF because it's easier, but again, there are a lot of issues there with resolution. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. But this is the RTF format. One of its biggest strengths is flexibility when making changes and just how convenient it is to make those changes. So we've made a change. Let's go back to the composer and take a look at what it looks like once we reload it in. Alright, so we're back in the composer, and we see we have our form here, sample invoice form. It's highlighted. And once you have it highlighted, you'll note that in the toolbar beneath the main menu, there is this little icon here, this reload form icon. And if you have an RTF, you can select this reload form icon to reload the form without you having to do anything else. It'll automatically reload it if you select this icon. So let's go ahead and do that to see the change, to see our invoice go from black to red. There it is, and we'll see down here that the invoice is now in red instead of black. And so you can do that really easily with any kind of RTF form. PRN and PDF, less flexible, have different advantages, but one of the cool things about the RTF is you can automatically load them in. So we have that. How do we get the data to line up? Well, I said previously there are really two ways. You can add a bunch of variables here in the top pane of the viewer and then place them with rules, or what you can do, which is a lot easier, it saves you some time, is you can move the form around either in your publishing tool by moving the various boxes and line elements and text elements, or you can do it in the composer using the offset adjustment toolbar at the bottom of the viewer here. And so let's go ahead and show that, because obviously you can move things around in your publishing tool, you're familiar with it. But in the composer here, the offset adjustment toolbar can be a little tricky, a little intimidating at first, but it's really fairly intuitive. You have on the bottom left here, you have your form top offset. And if we scroll up, just to go to the top here, you'll see this will take your form. If you adjust this, it'll move your form up and down. And so it'll move the form up and down. We don't really need to do that in this particular case. So if we go to the next set of arrows with a field, we'll see we can move our form to the left or to the right. And let's go ahead and move it right a little bit. The big arrows will move it in larger chunks of 25. We don't really need it that much. The smaller arrows will move it in chunks of 2.5. And let's go ahead and give it, 15 is pretty good. 15 should work. So we've moved it over a little bit. We've moved it to the right. If we wanted to move it left, you could put a negative in front of that. That would make it really easy, or you could just use the left arrows. To the right of that, we can move our data, and we can move our data up or down in the first set of arrows here. And to do that, you could use the arrows to move it up, or the arrows to move it down. But just to make things easy, I'll throw out a number. I want to move it down, so I'll throw a negative here, and let's say 215 ought to do. And there you go. We see we've moved it down, so it's lining up a little bit better. It looks much better than it did. But we're still not quite there, because if you look here, we still have somewhat of a disaster going on with these boxes, and it's just not lining up well. So we want to continue to move things around a little bit. We can move our data to the right or to the left if we want. The left would be negative, the right would be a positive value. And let's move it to the right a little bit. 7.5 is, that might be a little too much. Let's move it 5. 5 should work, and that's just to keep things clean there on the right side. But again, we still are not seeing anything happen with this. It's just not looking so good. So what can we do? Well, here's where lines per inch and characters per inch can come into play. This particular field here, the second from the right, is the lines per inch field. And this is the number of data lines in every vertical inch. And let's go ahead and change this to 6.5. That's pretty good. And see, look at that. It moved up our data quite a bit. And things are looking, they're matching a little bit. They're looking pretty good. We're still not completely lined up, but it's looking better. The furthest to the right here, this field, is our characters per inch. And this is the number of characters per inch horizontally, and it's used with fixed fonts. If you're using a proportional font, you'll see a different field here. It'll be the number of characters per inch vertically. So it just kind of depends on what font you're using. And let's go ahead and adjust this to a value of 10. 10.3 should do the trick here. There we go. And if we look at that, that looks pretty good. So we've got everything looking pretty solid here. It's all lining up. If we go down the line, looking pretty good. And if you wanted to get a better look, because what you see in the viewer is not always what you're going to get when you print it or output something to a PDF file. It's not necessarily WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, but it's fairly close. But if you wanted to zoom in or zoom out, you can go up here to the viewer and you see these little zoom in, zoom out icons. And let's zoom in a little bit. And that gives us a better idea of what it's going to look like. And as you see, most of it's pretty well lined up. You could play with it a little bit more to make it look a little cleaner. Give yourself maybe a little more padding in here if you move the data around a little bit or the form a little bit. But it looks pretty good. So this would be good enough to print perhaps or to output to a PDF. So we've got everything lined up pretty well. How do we create a variable? Because you can't really do much with the data just as is. You'll need to create a variable. You'll have to capture that string of characters somehow, and then you can adjust it or modify it in any way, shape, or form that you would like. So to create a variable, we can, and let's go ahead and create the variable of the shipped to, the shipped date here. And if we right-click and or left-click rather and drag over the shipped and right-click and select Add Variable. So left-click and drag, right-click, Add Variable. We'll see our variable dialog will display. And we can go ahead and leave it as is. There's not too much that we could really would need to adjust in this particular case. And we've grabbed our ship date. And if you notice, and let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit so we can see things a little more clearly here. You notice we have removed it from where it once was. It used to be right here in our data file, but it's not on our form anymore. If we go back, and I can right click and edit the variable here. If I wanted to keep the data where it is, I could have selected copy original data to output, but I want to place it in a different place, so we'll cancel out of that and leave it as is. How do I place this data back onto my form, whether it's in the same place or a different place? It's up to me. I right click in the form and select Add Rule, Place Text. The Rule Properties dialog will display. We'll go ahead and from the Use Variable dialog, select the variable we just created and select OK. Place Text Action dialog will display. You can adjust the positioning, the alignment, implement some word wrapping if need be, change the font, but for now we'll just accept the defaults, and there it is. Our shipped is back. We can move it around, dragging and dropping it wherever we would like it to go, and I'd like it to just go right underneath the due date there. And if we zoom out, we can see that our due and our shipped are a little bit over, so I could probably move my shipped over here and grab my due date and make a variable of that. Let's go ahead and put it there. If I grab my due date, let's make a variable of that. Variable 2 will work. We've grabbed our due date, and right click, Add Rule, Place Text, Use Variable dialog, variable 2 for our due date. OK. We'll select OK again, and there we go. We've got our due date right there, and we can have it look like that, and we'll zoom in a little bit so we can see it again. So we've got shipped and due date, we've created variables and we've moved them. Looks a little cleaner, looks a little nicer. So you can do that with rules. You can also add barcodes with variables, and a way to do that is, let's say we wanted to create a barcode of our customer purchase order number right here. So what we could do is, I still want to keep my customer purchase order number where it is on my form. So what I would do is right click and add variable after I have left clicked and dragged, and I'm going to select copy original data to output because I want to keep my customer PO number where it is on the form, but I want to create a barcode from that. And so we'll select OK. And notice the data is still there, but we still have a variable of our customer order purchase number. So with this, we can pick a spot where I want to place it. I'll place it up here. Right click and select Add Rule, and we'll select 1D barcode. And again, at any time you can edit the names here. I'm just not editing them because there's really no need, but you can edit the names, and for variable 1 you could call it shipped, variable 2 you could call it due date, variable 3 you could call it barcode or customer PO number barcode. You can edit the names very easily and select OK, and here we can select the barcode type. eFORMz supports a variety of barcode types, not just 1D but 2D, and as well as quick response. Again, we'll just select 3 of 9 here and keep it as is, accepting the defaults. Select OK, and there we have it. We have ourselves a barcode of our customer purchase order number at the top there. What if I wanted to add a logo? What if I wanted to add an image? Well, that's a very common thing. You can add an image directly to your form template in your publishing tool. That's one way of doing it. But another way of doing it, in a way I think that is easier, is simply to add the image to the project. That way you don't have to keep the image in a certain location. It's always with the project no matter what. It comes into eFORMz and it looks great. There's no need to, it gives you more flexibility, in other words. You don't have to maintain it on the form template. You can just keep it in the project, edit the scaling and the resolution in eFORMz if need be. It just gives you a little more flexibility. So how do we do that? Well, we can right-click our project over here in our project tree and select Properties and Images. And our Images tab of the project properties will display. If we select this Add button here, it'll give us some options. We can add images from any folder. And I have a Minisoft logo here. And if I select Open, the Image Scaling Properties dialog will display. I can adjust the height and width any way I would like, as well as the resolution, and scale it, of course. But for now, I'm just going to accept the defaults, and I have my Minisoft logo in the project now. So it's going to stay in the project no matter what I do. Unless I manually remove it, it's going to be there. And go ahead and select OK. How do I place it on the form? Well, we'll go back to another rule. Let's say I want to place it right here beneath the due date. Right-click and select Add Rule, Load Image. And the rule properties will display. For use variable, just select NA. It's kind of just a placeholder variable. It's very easy to use for images. And go ahead and select OK. And we'll see, it'll give me an options. There are a variety of ways to add images in eFORMz. You can do it with the project using a rule variable, file, PDF file, component. This is for use with composite data files, a little more complicated. If you're using the document template, you could use it from a URL, but we are not, of course. So we've got our image in the project. We have it selected. Let's click OK. And there it is. It's obviously extremely large here. And we could adjust the scaling again by going back to our project properties, images, and selecting that and selecting Edit Scaling. And let's go ahead and shrink this down a little bit. Give our desired width and height. Let's make it 360. We'll see what kind of damage that does. There we go. That makes it look a lot better. And we'll place it right there. So that looks pretty good. So we've got an image, we've got a barcode, we've got all sorts of things going on. How do we take a look at this? By sending it to the printer or outputting it to a PDF for viewing before we take it to the printer. Well, to do that manually from your workstation, since we don't have all of the configurations going for the automated process, and there are other videos that we have that look at that. But just to get a quick look at this from our local workstation, we can go to the main menu, and under Run, you can select Print, and that will bring up your options. If you are licensed for a certain number of printers, it'll bring up those printers that you've configured and send it to that printer. Or we can output it to a PDF and view it that way. There are, of course, a variety of other output options, as we see here. Several output options, but PDF is the one that would be easiest to view. Go ahead and select Sample, and we'll want to put it under our video sample folder that I made here. And if we click Save, our PDF file will display. And as you see, we have everything we did. Our data is lining up pretty well with our form. We could edit it a little bit more, but it looks all right for now. And of course, our form template looks pretty good. It has everything we did, including the change we made to the invoice color. We have our barcode, the 3 of 9 barcode we created for the customer purchase order number. We have a logo, that image that we added earlier. And if we scroll on down, it looks pretty good. So now we've seen that we can create a new project from scratch using a form template.